This is my true story. For years I thought my wife and I shared every secret, every memory, every tradition. But there was one thing she always kept to herself. Every Christmas, she locked her room for 3 hours. She said it was her quiet time, something sacred, something she didn't want disturbed. I respected that. I loved her enough to trust her. But after 20 years of marriage, that trust became curiosity, then fear. And the day I broke that door, what I saw changed everything. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so my story can reach more people. Every Christmas, the same thing happened. Morning would start bright and warm, the smell of cinnamon and coffee filling the house. She would smile, serve breakfast, laugh at small jokes, and act as though everything was perfectly normal. Then, right around noon, she would quietly excuse herself and walk into the bedroom. The door would lock, and she would stay inside for 3 hours, not 1 minute less, not 1 minute more. I never questioned it at first. She said it was her personal tradition, something she needed to do alone every year. She claimed it helped her remember her late parents, and I respected that. I thought everyone had their own way of dealing with grief. In those early years, I'd keep myself busy while she was locked away. I would decorate the tree, make cocoa, or sit by the fireplace. Sometimes I'd even play soft music, hoping that when she came out, she'd feel lighter, maybe ready to share what was going on in her heart. But she never talked about it. When she stepped out after those 3 hours, her eyes were red, her voice quiet, and she'd force a smile. "Everything's fine," she'd say, and I believed her. Love makes you blind in the gentlest way. As the years went by, the pattern never changed. Every Christmas, the door would close, and I would wait. At first, I thought it was sweet that she had a private moment she cared about so deeply. But eventually, it started to feel strange. Why always on Christmas? Why exactly 3 hours? Why so secret? I brushed it off for a long time, telling myself not to ruin something sacred. But in the back of my mind, something began to stir. Curiosity, worry, maybe both. I started noticing other things. She never let me touch that part of the closet where she kept a small box. She would lock her phone during the holidays, something she didn't do any other time. Once, I even heard faint sounds behind the door, not crying, not prayer, but a sort of quiet murmur, like someone whispering to another. When I asked her afterward, she said she was talking to memories. It sounded poetic, but the answer didn't sit right. Friends often asked why she disappeared every Christmas. I would laugh it off and say, it's her thing. But even I didn't know what that thing really was. It was the only part of her life that seemed closed to me. We shared everything, bank accounts, secrets, struggles, but not that. I used to think love was about trust, and maybe that's why I stayed silent. I wanted to prove I wasn't the kind of husband who invaded privacy. I wanted her to feel safe with me, but with time, her behavior began to change. She grew distant, less affectionate. Christmas became a day of silence, not warmth. I'd wait outside the room, pretending not to care, but inside I felt forgotten. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about feeling excluded from my own marriage. I began to feel like there were two worlds in my home, one where she existed with me, and one behind that locked door where I didn't belong. Sometimes I would press my ear to the door. Most times I heard nothing. Other times, faint sounds of paper rustling or a quiet hum of music. I tried convincing myself it was harmless. Maybe she wrote letters to her parents or prayed in her own way. But the feeling that something deeper was hidden in that room never left me. It sat in my chest like a quiet ache every December. And yet, I did nothing. I kept trusting, kept waiting, kept believing that whatever she was hiding wasn't meant to hurt me. I told myself it was love that made me patient. But now, looking back, I realize it wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of knowing the truth. Because deep down, I think a part of me already suspected that what was behind that door would destroy everything I believed about her, about us, about 20 years of marriage built on what I thought was trust. Over the years, what started as quiet curiosity began turning into something darker. Doubt crept into my mind like a slow poison. I tried to push it away, but it always came back stronger. Every time Christmas approached, I felt the same unease tighten around my chest. I wanted to trust her, I really did. But trust without honesty feels hollow. The warmth in her eyes began to fade, and her laughter stopped sounding real. We used to share everything, meals, plans, even worries. But now she barely spoke to me. When she did, her words felt rehearsed, as if she was reading from a script she'd repeated too many times. She would smile when I looked at her, but that smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. I started noticing the smallest details, her hands trembling slightly when she locked the door, her phone always on silent, her sudden irritation when I walked too close to her desk. I tried not to assume the worst, but the human heart always feels when something is wrong. It wasn't one thing. It was hundreds of little things adding up over time. The way she looked away when I mentioned Christmas plans. The way she flinched when I touched her shoulder before noon that day. I started questioning myself. Was I imagining it? Was I becoming paranoid? I blamed my own loneliness for making me overthink. Maybe I was just growing insecure with age, I told myself. But then I remembered how she used to be. The way she'd hold my hand without hesitation. How she used to decorate the tree with care, hum carols softly under her breath. Those moments felt like another lifetime now. Something inside her had changed, and I could feel it even when she said everything was fine. One year, I tried something different. I left the house early on Christmas morning, pretending to run errands. I wanted to see what she would do when she thought I wasn't around. When I came back 2 hours later, her car was gone. She returned just before lunch, carrying a small box wrapped in ribbon, smiling as if nothing had happened. When I asked where she'd been, she said she went for flowers. But there were no flowers in the house that day. That's when the doubt grew teeth. I started keeping mental notes, her movements, her expressions, her lies that seemed harmless on the surface but carried weight underneath. She began avoiding my eyes when I asked about simple things. And every year, as Christmas came closer, her mood would shift. She'd grow quiet, distracted, as though she was somewhere else entirely. I remember one Christmas Eve, I asked her if she wanted to invite family over. She refused immediately, said she wanted just the two of us. But it never really was the two of us. Because for those 3 hours, I was alone again. Sitting in a silent house, staring at a locked door, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. It tore at me. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, listening to the faint ticking of the clock, wondering what secrets she was keeping. I thought about opening the door so many times, but every time I stopped myself. I told myself that trust meant giving space, but deep down, I knew I was scared of the truth. What if she was hiding something I couldn't forgive? What if the love I believed in all these years was just a well-built illusion? Still, I stayed quiet. I smiled through dinners, exchanged gifts, pretended not to notice her phone lighting up late at night. I tried to convince myself that every marriage has mysteries, that maybe she just needed her own world. But every Christmas, as she closed that door, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The doubt grew so heavy I could barely breathe. And though I didn't know it then, that doubt was warning me that the truth behind that locked door would destroy everything I thought was real. That Christmas morning felt different from the start. The air was heavy, the silence thicker than usual. I woke up early, made coffee, and waited for her to come down. She did, smiling faintly, handing me a wrapped gift like every year. But I could see in her eyes something was off. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the mug. I asked if she was all right. She said she was just tired. I wanted to believe her, but the unease in my chest wouldn't leave. I watched her walk down the hall and close that same door. The soft click of the lock echoed louder than any sound I'd ever heard. For a while, I tried to keep myself distracted. I turned on the radio, flipped through old albums, even stepped outside to clear my head. But my mind kept drifting back to that room upstairs. 3 hours. Every year, the same ritual. What was she doing that needed to be hidden from me? I stared at the clock as the minutes dragged by. Each tick felt like a warning. The longer she stayed inside, the heavier my thoughts grew. I told myself to trust her, but trust was already hanging by a thread. I stood outside the door after the first hour passed. I listened carefully. The house was silent. Too silent. No footsteps, no sound of movement, not even her voice. My heart began to race. I knocked softly. "Are you okay?" I asked. No response. I waited a few seconds, knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. There was no sign of life behind it. My hands began to sweat and my stomach twisted with dread. I didn't know if I was more afraid of finding her hurt or of finding out something I didn't want to know. The second hour passed, and I couldn't take it anymore. I tried calling her phone. It rang once, then went silent. I felt the walls closing in around me. The house, once full of warmth, now felt cold and foreign. I thought about all the years I had respected that door, all the times I'd chosen silence over answers. But something in me changed that moment. The need to know became stronger than the fear of finding out. I couldn't pretend anymore. When the third hour approached, I decided I would knock one last time. If she didn't answer, I was going in. I stood there, my hand hovering near the handle, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. I called her name again. No reply. I pushed the handle gently, but it was locked from the inside. That's when panic took over. I called out louder, my voice cracking, begging her to open the door. Still nothing. The silence inside felt like an answer I didn't want. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the spare key from the drawer, and rushed back. My hands shook as I tried to fit it into the lock. It didn't turn. She had changed it. That realization made my head spin. Why would she change the lock if she had nothing to hide? I pounded on the door, shouting her name. Still no response. My heart raced faster, my vision blurred. And then, something inside me snapped. I took a step back and slammed my shoulder into the door. Once, twice. On the third hit, it cracked open. The sound of wood breaking filled the hallway. I stood there for a moment, gasping, staring into the room that had been off limits for so many years. It felt like I had crossed into another world, one built entirely on lies. I could see her sitting at the desk, frozen in shock, her hands clutching something I couldn't yet see. The room smelled of perfume and paper, a mix of old memories and secrets. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I didn't know what I was about to find, but I knew my life would never be the same after this moment. The sight before me froze my breath. My wife sat at the desk, motionless, as though caught in the middle of a crime she didn't expect to be seen. The air in the room felt heavy. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, every second sounding louder than the last. For a moment, neither of us moved. My heart was beating so fast, it hurt. I took a slow step forward, and she looked away. That was when I noticed the papers scattered across the floor. Letters, dozens of them, all written in her handwriting. My body went cold. I bent down and picked one up. I didn't want to believe what I saw, but the words on the page said everything I needed to know. Each letter was dated, every year, every Christmas. I glanced around the room and realized there were piles of envelopes stacked neatly in boxes against the wall. It wasn't some small secret. It was a ritual, one she had carried out for years. My hands shook as I looked closer at the one in my hand. It began with her calling someone by name, a name I recognized immediately, my boss. That single word made my knees weak. I almost dropped the letter. My mind spun, searching for some other explanation, but the truth was there in front of me, clear as day. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. She finally stood up, tears in her eyes, but it was too late for tears. I stared at her, then at the letters again. All those years she had locked herself away. She hadn't been praying or mourning. She had been writing to him, to the man I trusted, the man I worked with every day. 1,000 memories flashed through my head at once. The late-night calls she said were work-related. The sudden gifts from my boss that never made sense. The way she avoided family gatherings and claimed she was tired. All of it connected now, and it made me sick. My heart felt like it was splitting apart. Every Christmas morning that I had spent alone, wondering what she was doing, she had been pouring her heart out to another man, the same man who once toasted our anniversary at dinner. I stood there trembling, holding the letter in one hand. The silence in the room was unbearable. I took another step forward, and she whispered something I didn't hear. My mind was too loud, filled with rage and disbelief. The years of trust, the home we built, the life we shared, all of it suddenly felt fake. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the sight of her secret world, the one she built right under my roof. Something inside me snapped then, not with anger, but with clarity. I realized I couldn't stay there another second. I didn't want to hear excuses or stories or lies. I didn't want to hear her say she was sorry. There were no words that could undo what I had seen. My decision came quietly, without shouting or breaking anything. I took a deep breath, folded the letter, and set it down on the desk. I looked at her one last time and turned toward the door. As I stepped out of that room, I felt something heavy lift off my chest. Not relief, but finality. For 20 years, I had lived beside a stranger, and now I knew it. I didn't look back. I walked downstairs, grabbed my coat, and left the house without saying another word. The snow outside hit my face, sharp and cold, but it was nothing compared to the chill in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. When I reached the end of the street, I stopped and turned around once. Through the window, I could see the faint glow of the room where she still stood. That was the last time I ever saw her. From that moment, my marriage, my trust, and my life as I knew it were over. I made my decision to leave behind the lie I had been living and never open that door or that part of my heart again. When I stepped back into that room, my knees felt weak, my breath uneven. I forced myself to look again, even though part of me wanted to walk away and never see it. The letters were everywhere, some folded neatly in envelopes, some half-written, some stained with what looked like tears. I picked one off the floor, my fingers trembling. The paper was soft from being handled too often, and the handwriting was hers, familiar, beautiful, and full of emotion. But not for me. Every word she had written was for another man, the man I once called my boss, the man I trusted with my business, my time, and my friendship. I moved slowly, my eyes scanning the chaos in front of me. On the desk lay photographs, not of our family, not of our life, but of him. Pictures from office parties, company trips, moments I barely remembered. She had cut herself into some of them, standing beside him, smiling like she used to smile with me years ago. I felt my stomach twist. The room I thought she used for solitude was a shrine to betrayal. Her perfume lingered in the air, sweet and suffocating. Every breath felt like poison. I noticed a small wooden box pushed under the desk. I hesitated, but then pulled it out. Inside were old cards, receipts from hotels, and gifts wrapped with care, his name written on each tag. The earliest date went back almost 10 years. 10 years of lies, 10 Christmases spent writing him letters while I sat alone by the fire thinking she was honoring family traditions. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, a dull roar of disbelief. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The shock was too heavy, the pain too sharp for tears. I looked up and saw her watching me. She looked broken, but not surprised. It was as if she had expected this day to come, just didn't know when. She whispered my name once, but I couldn't answer. The silence between us was unbearable, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. I walked toward the window to get air, but the sight of our decorated tree outside, the one we put up together that morning, only made my heart sink deeper. It all felt fake now, every light, every ornament. I turned back to the letters, forcing myself to keep reading because I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. Each word tore another piece of me away. She wrote about dreams, promises, and love that wasn't meant for me. I saw my own name only once, in a line where she said she felt guilty for lying to me. That single mention hurt more than everything else. I realized I had been living beside a stranger who spoke my name out of habit, not affection. I sat down slowly, my hands gripping the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. The pain was physical now, sharp in my chest, heavy in my throat. I looked at her again, hoping for some denial, some reason that could make sense of it all. But she said nothing. Her eyes were dry, her lips pressed together. Maybe she had cried enough over the years to have nothing left. Maybe she didn't care anymore. I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty hurt the most. For a long moment, I just stared at the floor. The papers scattered around looked like pieces of a life torn apart. My life, our marriage, our trust. I realized I had been blind, not because I couldn't see the truth, but because I refused to. Every red flag, every uneasy feeling, I had buried them all under the idea that love meant trust, no matter what. And now I was standing in the ashes of that belief. The worst part wasn't that she loved someone else. It was that she had chosen to keep living a lie, pretending, year after year, right under my nose. Every Christmas, she had smiled, hugged me, cooked dinner, and then locked herself away to write love letters to another man. The thought was unbearable. I knew, in that moment, nothing would ever be the same again. The discovery didn't just end our marriage, it ended the version of myself that believed love was enough to keep two people honest. When I picked up one more letter from the floor, my hands trembling, I saw my own name written in the corner, not as a note of love, not even as part of a sentence, but mentioned like a shadow, something she had to hide behind. The words felt like acid. She wrote about how he doesn't suspect anything, and how it's easier to pretend now. I could almost hear her voice saying those words. It was then that I finally understood the full weight of betrayal. She hadn't simply loved another man. She had built an entire world out of lies and used me as the cover to protect it. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made over the years, working overtime to give her comfort, missing family gatherings to make sure the bills were paid, bringing her breakfast in bed every Christmas morning before she locked herself away. And now I realized, while I was downstairs setting the table and wrapping gifts, she was upstairs writing to someone else, describing her loneliness and suffocation as if I were some cruel stranger instead of the man who gave her everything. It broke me in ways words can't explain. I turned to look at her. She still hadn't moved much, only standing there with her arms crossed, as if she'd already accepted whatever was coming. Her eyes didn't hold shame or fear, only exhaustion, maybe relief that the lie was finally out. That hurt more than anything. It meant she was tired of pretending, not because she cared about what she'd done to me, but because she'd grown bored of the act. She had been waiting for me to find out. I wanted to shout. I wanted to ask her why. Why him? Why all the years of deceit? Why the performance, the dinners, the smiles, the small touches that now meant nothing? But the words never came. My throat was tight, and every time I opened my mouth, it felt like a storm trapped inside me. She must have seen it in my eyes because she started to speak, slowly, almost calmly. Her voice didn't shake when she said she never stopped caring for me, just that she found something different in him. I couldn't believe it. The cruelty wasn't just in her actions, it was in how easily she spoke them. She told me that it began as friendship, that I worked too much, that she felt alone. Then the letters started, then the visits. Then the holidays spent apart while she told me it was self-care. Every excuse I had accepted, every little lie I brushed aside, was part of a plan I never saw forming. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, but that phrase sounded meaningless. Intent doesn't matter when someone chooses deceit over honesty, year after year. My chest ached, not from anger anymore, but from an emptiness I couldn't describe. Betrayal isn't loud, it's silent. It eats away at everything you thought was real, until nothing is left but disbelief. I felt small in that moment, like the years I had given her meant nothing, like my love had been used as currency to buy someone else's attention. She said he made her feel alive. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. I just stared at her, thinking of all the times I had defended her to friends, to family, even to myself. The worst part wasn't even losing her. It was realizing she was never really mine to lose. For so many years, I had loved a version of her that no longer existed, maybe never had. She had smiled for me, spoken softly, played the part of a wife, but her heart was somewhere else entirely. That realization stung more than any confession ever could. I put the letters back on the desk, one by one, my hands numb. I looked at her one last time and saw a stranger standing where my wife used to be. Everything in that room, the papers, the perfume, the still air, felt poisoned. I walked out quietly, my footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving behind not just her, but the man I used to be. Because in that moment, I understood something simple and painful. Trust, once broken, can never truly return. When the words finally came out of her mouth, they didn't sound real. I had imagined many explanations in my head, but not this one. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even raise her voice. She spoke like someone reading from a script she had rehearsed too many times. She said it all started as comfort, that my long hours at work made her feel lonely, that my silence gave her space to drift. But loneliness doesn't write love letters for 10 years. Loneliness doesn't plan, hide, and lie every Christmas. What she called loneliness was simply choice, a choice to betray. She told me she never meant for it to go this far, that it was just emotional at first. Innocent, she called it. Then one Christmas, she said, she crossed a line she couldn't undo. She said it like it was a mistake, but it wasn't. A mistake is when something happens once. This was deliberate, repeated, planned, year after year. She said she kept it secret because she didn't want to hurt me, but the irony of that nearly made me laugh. Every day she stayed, every word she spoke after that, was another cut I didn't feel until now. She admitted that he promised to leave his wife for her, but he never did. So every Christmas, she wrote him another letter, begging him to choose her. Every year, she waited, believing he would walk through the door, and he never did. The letters were her hope, her escape, her obsession. And I was the man standing in her way, the reminder of everything she couldn't have. She said it softly, but I heard it clearly. I had become the obstacle in her fantasy, not the partner in her life. Listening to her speak, I realized she wasn't confessing out of guilt. She was confessing out of exhaustion. She wanted to be free, not from the lie, but from the burden of hiding it. I saw in her face that she didn't love me anymore, maybe hadn't for a long time. I tried to search for anger inside me, but all I felt was emptiness. It was strange. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull, quiet, spreading slowly like smoke, filling every corner of my chest. She said she stayed with me out of pity. That line almost broke me. She claimed she didn't want to destroy me by leaving. But that was exactly what she did. Not by walking away, but by staying and pretending. Every morning kiss, every dinner conversation, every "I love you," all of it built on pity. She didn't just take away my trust. She took away my dignity. I realized in that moment that betrayal isn't only about being cheated on. It's about being turned into a fool without knowing it. I asked her one question. Why didn't she just go? Why keep up the act? She said she didn't want to lose the security, the house, the reputation, the comfort. She had wanted both lives, the safety of mine and the excitement of his. When she said that, I felt something inside me die completely. Not just love, but every memory we ever shared. Because if love can be traded for comfort, it was never love at all. She reached out to touch me, maybe to soften the blow, but I stepped back. Her touch didn't feel like comfort anymore. It felt like fire. I could see in her eyes she wanted forgiveness, but not because she was sorry, because she wanted relief. I couldn't give her that. I didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't hit the wall like men in movies do. I just looked at her and saw the truth. She had already left me long ago. I was only catching up to it now. In the quiet that followed, she whispered that she still cared for me, in her own way. I almost laughed at that. Love isn't measured in halves or pieces. You either give it or you don't. She had given hers away long ago, and now she was trying to act as if fragments were enough to rebuild what she broke. But some things can't be rebuilt. Not trust, not respect, not the image of someone you thought would stand beside you forever. So I turned away. Her voice followed me, but I didn't listen. I walked down that hall knowing this wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of the person I used to be. And as painful as it was, part of me felt strangely free. Because when someone tells you the truth after years of lies, it doesn't destroy you, it releases you. After her confession, the silence between us became unbearable. I walked out of the room that day feeling like the walls were closing in around me. The air felt heavy, almost toxic. My legs moved, but my mind was numb. I remember reaching the bottom of the stairs and sitting there for a long time, not knowing what to do next. It felt like my entire world had collapsed in a single moment. Everything I had built, every dream I had shared with her, every plan for our future, all of it turned to dust right before my eyes. I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. The days that followed blurred together. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, thinking it had all been a bad dream. But then I'd see the empty space in bed beside me, and reality would hit again. The house that once felt warm now felt like a stranger's home. Every corner carried a memory. Every sound reminded me of her laughter, and every silence reminded me it was gone. It's strange how betrayal doesn't just steal a person. It steals your sense of safety, too. My mind kept replaying the years we spent together. Every Christmas, every kiss, every promise. I started questioning everything. Were any of those moments real? Did she ever truly love me? Or was it all just convenience? I tried to remember the woman I married, the one who held my hand when life was hard, who cried with me when we lost our first child. But the more I thought, the harder it became to separate the truth from the lie. It all blurred together into one long story of devotion from my side and deception from hers. I tried going to work, but I couldn't face my boss. The thought of him reading those same letters, laughing maybe, or keeping them hidden in his office drawer, it made me sick. I resigned quietly, sent an email, and never looked back. I didn't even pack up my things. I couldn't stand the idea of walking into a place that now felt tainted. My colleagues called for a while, asking if I was all right, but I didn't answer. What was I supposed to say? That the man I trusted destroyed my home, and the woman I loved helped him do it. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in the living room staring at the photos on the wall. Smiling faces, happy trips, family dinners, all lies now. I tore them down one by one, but even when the frames were gone, the memories stayed. They haunted me like ghosts. I stopped turning on the lights. I didn't want to see the space we once shared. Darkness felt easier than facing the truth. I lived like that for weeks, maybe months. I lost track of time. Friends tried to reach out. My sister came by once, but I didn't open the door. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted silence. I needed to break before I could rebuild. I stopped celebrating holidays. I stopped answering calls. The world kept moving, but I stood still, stuck in the wreckage of my life. It's strange how betrayal changes a person. You start questioning not just the person who hurt you, but yourself. How did I not see it? Was I blind, naive, or just desperate to believe in love that wasn't there anymore? The guilt ate away at me just as much as the heartbreak. I blamed myself for trusting too much, for forgiving too easily, for not noticing when love turned into routine. One day, I finally packed a small bag and left. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there any longer. The house was full of ghosts, and I was one of them. I walked out without locking the door, without leaving a note. I figured she already knew everything that needed to be said. That was the day I stopped being a husband and became a man trying to survive his own life. Looking back now, I think that was my breaking point. Not the moment I read the letters, not the confession, but the moment I realized there was nothing left to save. When love dies slowly, you don't notice it until the silence is louder than your heartbeat. That's when you finally accept the collapse. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens piece by piece until all that remains is the truth. When I left the house that night, I didn't take much with me. Just a few clothes, my wallet, and the silence that had followed me out the door. The world outside felt colder than I remembered. Even the streets I had driven down for years looked unfamiliar. Betrayal changes the way you see everything. It turns home into a prison and memories into weights you can't carry. I found a small motel near the edge of town and checked in under my first name only. I didn't want anyone to find me. Not her, not him, not even friends who meant well. I needed the world to forget I existed. The first few days were a blur. I barely ate. The food tasted like nothing. I'd wake up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, hearing echoes of her voice in my head. I kept wondering what she was doing, if she was crying, if she even cared that I was gone. But I stopped those thoughts as quickly as they came. I realized thinking of her was like reopening a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I had to learn how to stop caring. It wasn't easy. I thought about my son, how he would react when he found out. He was grown now, had his own life, his own family. But deep down, I knew he would take her side. She was always better with words, always knew how to play the part of the victim. And I was the quiet one, the one who never defended himself. That was my biggest mistake, being silent while my life was being rewritten by lies. So I didn't call him. I didn't want to hear pity in his voice, or anger I didn't deserve. I decided it was better if I just disappeared quietly. I spent my days wandering the city. I'd sit in cafes, order one cup of coffee, and just watch people go by. Happy couples holding hands, families laughing over lunch. All of it used to make me bitter. But after a while, it made me calm. I realized not everyone breaks. Some people find ways to survive. I wanted to be one of them again. I started reading old books, writing in notebooks, anything to keep my mind busy. It was strange. The pain didn't go away, but it started changing shape. It became something I could live with. Every now and then, I'd pass by a newsstand and see pictures of my old boss in magazines, awards, interviews, his smiling face. The same man who had stolen everything from me, my trust, my job, my wife. I thought I would hate him forever, but over time, that hatred turned into indifference. He had taken everything I had, yes, but not the one thing he could never touch: my ability to start again. After a few months, I found work at a small repair shop by the coast. The owner didn't ask questions, and I didn't give answers. It was simple work, fixing broken things, one piece at a time. Maybe that's why it helped me heal. Every screw tightened, every clock repaired, felt like a small step toward putting my own life back together. The ocean was only a few blocks away, and I started walking there after work. The sound of waves hitting the shore became my peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I rented a small apartment overlooking the water. No photos on the walls, no reminders of what used to be. Just quiet. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of salt in the air, and for a brief moment, I'd forget the past. Sometimes I'd still dream of her, but the dreams didn't hurt as much anymore. They were like faded photographs, distant, colorless. I'd wake up, take a deep breath, and remind myself, I survived. People say time heals everything. I don't believe that. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to live with the scars. My scars remind me that I gave love honestly, even if I received betrayal in return. They remind me that losing everything isn't the end. It's the start of something quieter, something truer. I may have lost my home, my wife, my family, but I found something far more important: peace. Now I live alone by the coast. It's been years since that Christmas night, but the memory still sits quietly somewhere in the back of my mind. The waves outside my window crash against the rocks every morning, and sometimes I sit on the balcony and listen. They remind me of life itself, constant, changing, sometimes violent, but always moving forward. That's what I've learned to do: move forward. I don't look back much anymore. The past still hurts, but it no longer defines me. It's just part of my story, not the ending, just a chapter that taught me what peace really costs. I keep my life simple now. I wake up early, make my own breakfast, take long walks by the beach, and watch people start their days. I don't talk much, but I notice everything: the joy in small moments, the way the sun rises without asking permission, the way strangers still smile when they pass you on the street. These things used to go unnoticed when I was lost in work, money, and family drama. Now they feel like gifts I never appreciated before. I guess pain strips away everything unnecessary until only truth remains. Sometimes I see couples holding hands, and for a second my heart tightens. But it doesn't last long. I don't hate love, I just understand it differently now. Love isn't about promises or perfect words. It's about honesty, And once honesty dies, love dies with it. I spent too many years loving someone who spoke beautifully but lived deceitfully. Now I'd rather live with silence than lies. That realization gave me a freedom I never knew I needed. I haven't seen my ex-wife since that day. I heard she moved to another city, remarried maybe. I don't really care. The old me would have wanted revenge or closure. The man I am now doesn't need either. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself when you stop waiting for answers. I don't need her apology, and I don't need to know why she did what she did. I just need to live without her shadow over me. My son reached out once after she left him too. He said he finally understood what she was capable of. We met for coffee. It was awkward, quiet, but peaceful. He apologized for not seeing the truth earlier. I told him there was nothing to forgive. Pain teaches everyone in different ways, and sometimes people need to lose comfort before they learn compassion. We talk sometimes now, not as much as I'd like, but enough. I see a little bit of my younger self in him, and I just hope he chooses differently in his own life. At night, when the world is quiet, I still think about what happened, but instead of anger, I feel gratitude. Because losing everything forced me to find myself again. For years, I was a husband, a provider, a worker, everything but a man who listened to his own heart. Now, I finally do. I don't own a mansion, I don't have wealth or luxury, but I have peace, and that's something no one can steal. Sometimes people ask me if I regret anything. I always say no. Regret is for those who want to change the past. I don't want to change it. The betrayal, the pain, the loneliness, all of it shaped the person I became. Without it, I'd still be living a comfortable lie. Now, I live an honest truth, even if it's a quiet one. I think that's a fair trade. When Christmas comes each year, I still feel that sting in my chest, but I don't hide from it anymore. I light a small candle by the window, sit in silence, and let the memories come and go. Then I open the door, step outside, and breathe in the cold air. Because no matter what life took from me, I'm still here. And that's enough.